Welcome back to Rerouted, where we explore unique career paths to give you the tools you need to create the life you want. On today's episode, I talk with May-Li Khoe, VP of Design at Handshake, the career platform for Gen Z. We talk about May-Li's journey into design, her work on early iPhones at Apple, and pursuing different art forms outside of the LinkedIn lens. Later in the episode, May-Li gives some incredible advice about starting from the bottom in a new discipline and not needing confidence as a prerequisite for action. There is no video for this episode, so thank you for bearing with audio only. Let's hop into it. May-Li, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Nicholas. Do you prefer Nicholas or Nick?
I tend to go by Nick, but kind of
Okay.
different people call me different things, so I don't really mind.
All right, well, thanks for having me on, Nick.
All right, so let's hop right into it. Currently, you work as a VP of Design at Handshake. You've had numerous roles before that we're going to talk about, but I want to start by asking what led you to go into design?
Well, I think the first time I realized I should probably work in design was when hours went by. I was in a Photoshop file just mucking around, and I realized I hadn't noticed the time pass at all. So I thought, well, what if I could do this for a living? That'd be pretty cool. I had always been attracted to like visual, like arranging things visually. That's something I always did as a kid, but I started getting asked to like design stuff a little bit when I was in college, and that's all that time in Photoshop is maybe when it clicked. I mean, some of the first things that I got paid to do were things like t-shirt designs and whatnot. But while I was in college, also, I was making the front end for a graduate student's program at the MIT Media Lab with the Software Agents Group under Patty Mice. And the grad student was named Anthony Chavez. It was actually, this is funny to talk about now in the year 2025, but it was actually a software agent marketplace, which, like, when you say that in 2025, it's like, oh, look, an agent marketplace. How about that? Anyway, it didn't really have a great front end, and so I redesigned the front end and I built it, and it was like CGI scripted in C because that's like what we did, or what some people did. And then, the sponsors would come by and see the demo and say like, "Oh wow, like this looks great." And the grad student told me afterwards, like it made me realize how important the interface to this is. So it was gratifying, I think, as an undergrad researcher to be like, "Oh, like I can have." Some impact here. They wound up picking our demo and like organizing the entire Media Lab demo day around like an agent marketplace. This is again in the 90s. So it was pretty cool at the time. Like there was like Times Digital did an article on it. As an undergraduate researcher, I never got credit for any of that stuff, but it was cool to be a part of it. And I think that's when I was like, oh, okay, I think I want to do work similar to this type of thing. And then when I graduated, I definitely wanted to go into design. I didn't study design. My undergrad degree was in computer science and electrical engineering, but I had taken as many art classes as possible. Art and design are not the same. I actually wanted to be an artist, but like that was not really allowed for various reasons we can get into if we want later. Um, and so I basically took the only job I could coming out of college that would let me do some design work because I had a little teeny tiny portfolio and it was a small agency, and they were like, okay, well, you're going to be doing front end development, but we'll let you do a little bit of design work every so often, maybe. And so that's how I wound up taking that job. That was like my first of multiple hybrid jobs where I was coding but also designing. And some of our early client work, I'm going to give you a highlight and a low light.
Sure.
Highlight was I worked on a billboard that went on the side of the NASDAQ building in Times Square, and we did
Very
that all in
cool.
Flash. And I programmed a little particle system of falling snow. It was like a holiday greeting card, and things had to kind of fall around the windows because NASDAQ building in Times Square has like a bunch of windows in it. So we had a map of the windows, and yeah, it was cool. Also, just like coding particle systems from scratch at that time was like really fun. Now you don't have to do it. You can just tell something to make you a particle system and it does. But another highlight was we did a little thing for the Olympic Games that was a snowball fight, and it was on old school cell phones, but there was like a little mitten and a snowball and a table. I didn't work much on the table, but I worked a little bit on on the phone interface, and so people were hucking snowballs at each other with these little tiny cell phones and a table that like lit up stripes. So that was cool. And then a like what I would call low light, except it wasn't a low light, and I kind of love telling people this, is that I also worked on a website that organized all the manuals for the New York Department of Environmental Protection. So it was literally like a way of organizing manuals for like HVAC systems and sewer systems, like sewage systems. So I say I like literally worked on like poop. Anyway, it's just like, people don't know sometimes that like when you start out, you just work on whatever. And in that case, like it was pretty cool because that's like how I learned about a lot of like city maintenance systems.
Yeah, not something
Yeah.
that one I'd
No,
expect, to be core knowledge, but definitely pretty cool, honestly. And
it is. Yeah.
presumably, I mean, I have to
Yeah, and it's
imagine that.
cool. It affects all of us.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Neat. All
Yeah.
right. So after those first few jobs, you're kind of doing some of that grunt work, getting some stuff like that, figuring it out. You ended up moving to Apple. Can you tell me a little bit about your time at Apple?
Yeah, I could tell you about my time at Apple. There was some other stuff in between because I,
Of
I
course.
went from there to, I was at Microsoft for a little while. And then, yeah, and then I did eventually wind up at Apple. Um, what do you want to know about my time at Apple, Nick?
I want to know
It's,
the
it was
types
like
of.
it was like 7 years.
I know, and you know what? You're right. That was unfair of me to say like, tell me about the 7 year period of your life, please, in a short and concise manner. That is audibly appealing. So thank you for calling me out on that. I'm curious a little bit about some of the systems that you designed, what it was like. You mentioned as well, and kind of this into Microsoft, kind of working on like that big tech. Obviously, big tech looks a lot different now than it did when you were there. But what it was like working there at that time, I mean, in my mind, that was a really exciting era in terms of iPhone development. So I'm kind of curious about the systems that you worked on, the types of teams that you contributed to, those types of things.
Got it. Okay, yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because per what you're saying of it being an exciting time, um, both at Microsoft and at Apple, what was really cool was that there was an aspect of like operating system design and development that was happening. And I think it's pretty rare that you get to work on an operating system or even anything sort of adjacent to an operating system. And while I feel like I didn't necessarily work like directly in all of the main things all of the time, I definitely worked along the edges of it and every once in a while dipped into the core of it. So it was really, really cool. And a totally different thing, right? Because like when you think about like the way that a lot of design works for a product that's like a third party product, there's a lot of testing and like number gathering and will this work and can we optimize the number of people who like hit the thing. And when you have like an operating system mentality, you're thinking about what's the hardware, what are the sensors, what do people need to do, what are the patterns? Like you're an
Mm,
architect more, like you're thinking about what's reusable and how things all fit together across a broader system. I'm realizing this now as I'm speaking to you. I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Which is very different from like optimizing click-through rates on like, the front door of something. Um, yeah. But when I started, we were proving out that you could have really dynamic web apps.
sure.
Like back then, it wasn't just a given that you could drag and drop stuff, that you could basically have applications inside a web browser that are super dynamic. And so the first project they put me on was going to be a demo for like the top 100 people at the company to show that like this stuff was possible. And I wound up working like day and night for like a couple weeks to like make this thing. And then I found out they were just going to use a video of the demo and it didn't have to be like live and working in dynamic, which obviously changes the development of it. I had like event snapping happening in the browser and all of this stuff. It was like all hand rolled because back then they didn't have like a gajillion frameworks for you to build on top of. Um, yeah. So I just remember like a few weeks in, I was like, no, what have I done? But then, uh, I mean, it was also really exciting. Steve Jobs was still alive then. He looked at our work every 2 weeks. Sometimes I had a VP sort of designing over my shoulder. And then this is hilarious, Nick. Like he would put the stuff on a thumb drive and then like run over to demo it to Steve.
Before airdrop existed.
No, no, and I'm like questioning myself now. I'm like, am I remembering this correctly? Like, was that actually happening? I think that actually happened. So wild to think about. Well, the other thing that happened back then was that the pixels were bigger, right? Like right now, we have these displays with like really high points per inch, right? So like everything looks smooth. But back then, like you could see the pixels. And so our work was expected to be pixel perfect. What that means, and it's still valid today, like if you learn how to see the pixel level, which all of us did back then, you could see when, because like the way that a raster display works, right? Like pixels are either on or off. So if the pixel's on, like completely on, then you get crisp lines. But if you make an icon or an asset and it's not exactly on the pixel, you'll get like kind of a bit in one set of squares and a little bit in other bit of squares, and it'll look blurry. So all of us wound up with this like way of being able to see when things were aligned, and Steve Jobs could see it too. So there was a lot of like sub-pixel work to make sure things were really crisp. The lines were all crisp. Everything was like very high quality detail. And we always worked out of stories. So we were like, okay, so a person arrives and they do this. It was almost like a narrative, and then we would paint the picture of what that experience looked like in pictures and then make decisions off of that. Which is very different from like literally how most of Silicon Valley works, where they have like a bunch of PMs make you a PRD, and then they tell you what number you're optimizing and whatever, whatever. The field that I came into and grew up in was completely different from what happens now
Sure.
for most designers. Yeah. So yeah. And then the next thing was I wound up getting pulled in to work on what called the first apps, because when the iPhone was released, which by the way, the iPhone wasn't out yet when I joined Apple. I think it was like a month in or something like that. We got sat down at an Apple town hall, and Steve told us, he's like, we're gonna totally, like, the world will not be the same after this. And there will be people who imitate us, but we're doing this first. There might be people who even do it better than us, but we're doing this first. And yeah, I mean, this like,
Yeah.
you're like what? But yeah, I was actually behind multiple locked doors working on what the first third-party developers would have access to, which is like more web apps, but on the phone. And so we were working closely with the mobile Safari team. There were a couple groups in the company that were building these like demo third-party apps. And I was working on one for photo sharing. And trying to think which other was. Oh yeah, and the RSS reader. I think those were the main two. Anyway, I went into a lot of detail there.
No, that was good. That was great.
There's like other
Very
stuff I would.
interesting.
That was like the beginning of Apple stuff, but I was like, oh, 7 years. Because then I also like, so then I worked on that, and then there was like Mobile Me, the Mobile Me disaster. There's the Mobile Me gallery. Then there's iCloud and like drawing 5 gajillion little clouds. But there were a bunch of us that did it. I'm not gonna take all the credit for that. There's a team of people that were all trying to figure that out, and I also was part of figuring that out. Um, and designing sign-in pages and like seeing them get blogged about. Then I wound up switching teams and joining a team called HID Prototyping. And we were embedded in the hardware organization, but like working closely with the firmware people. So basically, anytime we had new sensors or new ways of interpreting sensors, our team would work with applications across the entire company, as well as the operating stuff, to make sure that that sort of magic that happens between the hardware and the software, like the way that you like move your fingers and a pane moves with you, or you have like a multiple fingers like pinching in or zooming out, like all of that type of stuff. That was all stuff that we wound up working closely on. And so if we were able to like demo a lot of potential in a new method of human input, then it would get more funded, and then it would wind up in other places. So we worked on like the iPad, the Apple Pencil, Force Touch, haptic feedback. There's a lot of work that went into the Force Touch and the haptic feedback. I'm trying to remember what else. Oh, face effects, which are everywhere now, which have stories about, gosh, I don't know, Nick. I but yeah, it was fun. And I was there for some time.
So you mentioned that what a designer did, what you were doing, is a lot different than what a designer does now. Would you mind kind of diving into some of those differences?
Yeah, I mean, I think the main thing is that a lot of commercial quote unquote software as a service products, or like even now with like if you're designing for like an AI product, like there's a lot of stuff where you're like really optimizing your product's success, right? When you're working on an operating system or like like a computational system, like you're not trying to optimize like how many times people hit a buy button or something. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you're thinking about like what's the potential of computation, or like I have this in the case of HID prototyping, we would get a piece of hardware with a whole bunch of wires sticking out. Um, and there'd be a screen, and maybe usually the screen had had touchscreen capability, and then we would start playing with prototypes of what we could do with the sensor data and how that made sense for pro applications, how it made sense for like the main iOS or the main OS applications, or how it made sense like in how you move between windows. What happens if you swipe up with four fingers, for example? And then we would wire the sensor data in and like fake out all of the different ways that things could work. So if you take face effects, for example, imagine like now you stick your face in front of like a Snapchat filter or an IG filter, whatever, and it's like it's tracking with your face. In 2010, it was new tech that it like tracked your face. It was new that that was going to be performant. So we were like, okay, cool. We've got the sensor data. It's found our face. It can find our features. What are we going to do with it now? And then, you started coding a bunch of like stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what are we going to do with this? It wasn't immediately like, okay, the goal of this project is to make sure that we hit our target OKR of blah, blah percent in order to meet our Q3, blah, 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 like that. No, it was like, we have a computer. What can we do with it that is going to be something that sort of stands the test of time, useful,
Yeah.
that is intuitive for people? And then a lot of how we learned was by trying it ourselves a lot, over and over again, getting other people to try it, within this disclosure secrecy circles, of course. And a lot of like exercising our own good judgment. I think we had to learn a certain level of intuition that is not as common now. Like I think a lot of it now is just like we needed to test and optimize out of like 5 gajillion colors, but also because back then you couldn't do that, right?
Sure.
Like some
Yeah.
of the stuff I'm talking about was like really before ubiquitous smartphone adoption. You couldn't be like in someone's pocket collecting a gajillion numbers and all of the data all of the time in order to optimize all of the things, right? Like you had to just kind of have a pretty good instinct. I kind of wonder what it would mean to like design an operating system and be like, I'm trying to like, what are you trying to maximize? I don't know. I guess if I thought about it long enough, I could come up with something, but it doesn't feel like an interesting intellectual exercise to me, frankly.
I'm curious as well. Worked at Apple for 7 years, and you've had career past that. But at this point, I want to ask, what have you done in the past, and what do you continue to do to become and continue to grow into like a really excellent designer?
My number one advice, I think, for everybody who starts out doing this is, there's two things. One is it changes the way you look at the world. So just constant observation of everything. If you're walking up to a place and you're opening a door, you're noticing if that door is like easy to open, not easy to open. You're noticing like the tracking, the kerning on the letters on the side of the building. Like there's this one building I walk past all the time where the zeros are too close together and the one looks like it had a fight with the zeros. And I'm like, you could have typeset that. You could have. Or like, I know some of it's dumb. Some of it's just like the dumb shit, but it's real. Like, okay, at Apple, the corner rounding on all of the assets is done in a very deliberate way, where it's a continuous corner smoothing algorithm, so that there are no discontinuities in the tangent as in the curving of a rounded corner. So like you learn that, and then you go out into the rest of the world, and you see every time that's not done, right? Like, or if you have outer and inner corners, like have people like done the math right so that the rounding is correct and like those two curves like remain equidistant as they're rounding. Like a lot of the times you're walking down the sidewalk and you're like, okay, yeah, PG&E didn't do this one quite right. So it's that's our the people that do our electrical here, electrical gas, whatever, the little manholes. And so you're looking at how the world is put together all the time. That's just like a designer way of life. And that's constant. It's like the kind of thing where you're like, okay, I'm moving into a place. I know that I am right-handed and the other people in this house are right-handed, so we're going to put the kitchen utensils on the right-hand side that we need urgently while cooking. Like you think about those things. Like you can't not think about those things because you're a designer.
Hmm.
Like, it's just
Okay.
like touches everything. And then from like a tactical perspective, like the advice I give people when they're like, okay, I'm trying to like mock what I want things to look like is observing what are the choices in things that feel really great and why do you think people made those choices. The best way to do it, like for any creative field, is to literally recreate it from scratch. So this is often the case from like if you're an artist, you're a musician, or any medium you're doing, you're trying to figure out how did somebody get that effect in that thing that's really good. When I first started out, I had to draw over top of a lot of mocks that were coming to me flat, so they weren't coming to me layered, and so I had to come in and like literally redraw them, get the type right, get the tracking right, the type, the type weight, spacing. So then I learned from doing that, like what are all the spacing and type and shape choices that are being made in any single mock, and asking myself why. But then I was able to learn how to recreate it. Anyway, that's the advice I give to anybody in any creative field is like recreate a thing that you think is good. You also need to like learn how to notice what is good and then ask why. The same thing happens in writing. Yeah, music, literally anything. Why do you think he paused there? Why do you think they accelerated there? Did you notice that they're swinging around the beat? They're not on the beat.
Hmm.
Sustaining a note, like all those things have an effect. And the same thing goes for design.
So after your time at Apple, you joined Khan Academy. What led you to move into nonprofit and work at Khan Academy?
Khan Academy is, well, so there was an engineer that I had worked with a little bit who was being recruited to Khan Academy, and both of us were really interested in what the potential is for like digital interaction and learning. I think what we were particularly interested in at the moment might have been currently, I think it might be called like digital manipulables or something. Anyway, I forget what the name of it. It's a whole category of stuff now, but back then there wasn't much of it. And they basically, Khan Academy was like, okay, we really want to get him. He doesn't want to come without like having a designer that he respects and wants to work with. So why don't you, the two of you, come over and then you can mess around and kind of do whatever you want, as long as it has something to do with education. And we were like, cool. So I was ready. I think after like 7+ years at Apple, there were other reasons why I left. Honestly, I there were a lot of really nice people at Apple, but there were also like some environments that were just pretty hostile, to be honest.
Sure.
And I hate saying that sometimes because then people assume that like it's me, but it's not because I thought it was me, and then like I left and then like found out that there were other people that did the same thing, and also the stats of one of the places that I was in, they literally just were not able to retain people, and they especially weren't able to retain women. And it's not because we're worse at it in case somebody's having that thought, like, because people sometimes have those thoughts. Anyway, but it was time, 7 years, and like going to Khan Academy and kind of being able to muck around and do stuff in education and do something that I felt like was going to be like new and fun and interesting and a little bit more concrete of a problem was exciting. The other thing is that, like, I know it sounds weird, but sometimes new technology just becomes new technology because if you work on new technology over and over and over and over and over and over again, it starts to become its own thing. And you're like, okay, I've done enough of that. Now I want to do something else. I want to apply it. Let's apply it. Let's apply the new technology to some problems I understand or that I think I understand. So, yeah. So then I came over to Khan Academy with my research partner, Andy Matushak, who's brilliant. And we had a yeah, and we were both pretty silly, so that was helpful. But then they kept on asking me for help, or I would see things that I could fix, and so then I just kind of wound up having more and more scope over time. And then I wound up VPing the design team, which, by the way, I wasn't setting out to do. I wasn't actually trying to have a job in management. But at some point in time, they had a new COO join, and she said, "Do you think you need to have design at the executive level?" And I was like, "Well, if you want to hire serious designers, then they're only going to join if you have designers in the executive level." And she said, "Okay, well, I think you should do it." And I was like, does that mean I have to manage people?" And she was like, "Yes." And I was like, "I don't want to manage people." And she's like, "Look, if you're at all curious about managing people, then you should do it." And so I was like, "Fine, I'll try it."
All right.
But most of the reason I did it was just because I was trying to fix stuff. I was like, I wanted to prove that we can design things well for teachers and students. Because most of the times when people design stuff like really nicely, it's like for, I don't know, for somebody that already has like a lot of money to be okay in some other way. You know, that's why those things are like premium. And so I think part of it is that I wanted to democratize access to like well-designed things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because as you're talking about the different things that you're working on, it very much tracks along with like my like tweenage years, I would say. Like it's very much like my first phone was like an iPhone 6S and it had the haptic feedback and I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And then I like learned like HTML, CSS through Khan Academy in like my fourth grade classes, like when there was like downtime. So it's very personally for me, and I know this is very much not a unique experience for people my age. So it's very cool to kind of, see what's behind it. I remember getting the little guys in Khan Academy. That was like your kind of like your collectibles. I had like the Winston one because I did the coding classes. And I thought that was the coolest thing ever back in the day.
I remember Winston.
So yeah, I appreciate that, I'm kind of able to track along with like my own life milestone, so to speak. Yeah, and I don't study computer science now, but it very much was I did the courses. There was clearly some interest, and there's still, it's very much an early grabber and interest. So it's very neat.
Yeah, that was like such a cool part of the Khan Academy offerings. That was I'm trying to remember the name of the person who put a bunch of that computer science stuff together. It was like Pamela, I think was her name. Maybe you remember because you were taking a bunch of those. Yeah, but that stuff was really cool. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay. Anyways, I am curious. So you mentioned that you didn't want to be a manager at all. I'm curious what it was like kind of stepping into that management position when you didn't necessarily want it. Were there benefits to kind of having that like larger scale? What was that like? What was that like for you?
I think, initially it was hard. There's like a big change from being what's called an IC in the industry, which is like an individual contributor, to being a manager. There was a brief moment when people were like, "Oh, but we're all leaders." And I'm like, yes, the difference is, as a manager, you make decisions around hiring, firing, performance, and pay. And those are real. That's like the real life. So like,
Yeah.
I just think that sometimes people like put all kinds of like fluffy, leadership and blah, blah, blah. But like, you're making decisions about people's livelihood. That's
Yeah.
a huge responsibility. And I think that it may sound trite, like with great power comes great responsibility, but actually,
Yeah.
sometimes people do it because they're like, I'm climbing a ladder and like, I want a fancy title. And it's like, dude, like people's future relies on your judgment. And like if you are not thoughtful about the way, and you can't be perfect, of course, but also like, it's very different when you're responsible for hiring and like performance management, meaning like who gets a bonus or who gets a raise or like who do I have to let go for whatever the reason might be. Like the way that I put it to a lot of people is it's kind of like, when you're a little kid and you're like, why are the adults like sitting around the table still talking? Like you've gone outside, you'll have like played out an entire world, you like built a fort and like an empire like got built and it fell and you had a battle and like then there was like magic and like I don't know, like a whole multiple lifetimes are lived outside in the playground, and then you come back and the adults are like sitting exactly where they were sitting, like still having the conversation. And then one day you like emerge into adulthood and you're like, oh, like taxes and that boring stuff that radio guy is talking about all day, every morning. Like that thing is, affects things, that affect my parents, that affect the food that like lands on our table, and whether or not like, mom, dad, uncle, grandparents are able to like get treatment for their condition. Like you start realizing all of this stuff. And I feel like coming into management is like that same thing. It's like you come into
Sure.
the other side of things. Like when you're not a manager, like why are they in meetings all day? And then you become a manager and you're like, oh, you had all the shit that you're trying to talk about. Like, oh God. Yeah. So that's one of the ways I would describe the transition. The stuff that I like do love about it is I call it designing the design team.
Mm.
So you are designing the culture and the processes and like who you want to bring in, what they stand for, all of that stuff. So you can actually like create a group of people who work together in a certain way, who wind up developing certain kinds of relationships. And when you do it really, really well, like you can create something that outlasts the organization. So for me, that's actually like, you build software, the software gets shut down. You like work at a company, the company, maybe it'll last 100 years, but like some of the people that I've like brought together, those friendships have long outlasted them working together. I see them support each other. I see them help each other like move on in their careers. And to me, that's like the most gratifying thing. Like I help bring those people together. And I help set up an organization in which they like manage to like feel, there's some people love creating like places where there's constant like suspicion and competition and all that stuff.
Mm. Mm.
But there is that's not the only way to do things. So um yeah, so I've done things in other ways and been really proud of the way that people have sort of gone on to move in the world. Designing the design team is cool. um that part I really love, and I think that leaks out into like all kinds of other aspects of my life where it becomes very easy for me to like organize a gathering or whatever because I'm like, oh yeah, this is fine. This is like doesn't take much effort because you do it over and over again. Yeah.
Okay. I want to jump to something a little bit different as well. I'm curious, can you tell me everywhere about you when you look online, it always mentions DJing and creative writing. And when we spoke earlier, you mentioned DJing and creative writing. Can you tell me about that?
I mentioned DJing? That's funny. Okay. The DJing part, I actually don't do that much anymore, but I did for
Okay.
like 11 years.
Okay.
So it makes sense. I'm mostly playing live music now. I
Nice.
am thinking about getting back to DJing though, Nick. So I don't know. You tell
Okay.
me. What do you think? Do you do either of them?
Personally, I do not. No. This
Okay.
is kind of my DJing, to be honest with you. This has become this growing, starting to grow this podcast has become my DJing in a sort of way, has been my creative outlet.
Okay. I love that. I think it's great that you're doing this.
Thank you.
I love it when people want to see a thing in the world and make a thing. Yeah, so let's see. The DJing thing. So similar to like what you're doing with this podcast, it
Hmm.
was like there was a thing we wanted to see in the world and it didn't exist. So we're like, let's make it happen. So in 2008, me and my partner Federico and my friend Daniela Racon, we were traveling to a festival in the Pacific coast of Colombia, and it's called Festival Petronio Alvarez, and it is kind of this incredible sort of, I guess I don't want to call it a secret, but it's like it was very little known at that time, but the vibe was incredible. And when we were coming back from it, we were on a bus and there was a landslide and we were sort of stuck on the tiny highway that sort of wound its way through the Andean mountains and like, what are we gonna do? We're just hanging out, fogging up the bus. Eventually we all pile out. It's incredible. Like you're in the middle of these mountains and there's like a little hut in the corner and the concession guy is like, so sweet, and he didn't hike up his prices. He was just trying to make sure everybody got some food and drink, like, anyway, that's like where we were.
Hmm.
And we were having a conversation about how like there just wasn't the kind of party that we wished existed in the Bay Area. So we figured we need to make one. And we wanted a party where like people just come in and get down. You're there to dance and you're there open to all the different kinds of music. As opposed to being like, I think there's a lot of places where people go out, but they're not really going out because they're really actually trying to have a good time. They like go out
Hmm.
because they think that looking like you're having a good time while like I don't know it. There was a lot of stuff that was just like this is not our thing.
Yeah.
So then we came back. We're like, okay, we're gonna have to figure out how to DJ. So we started DJing. It started with just like playing a bunch of music in like Danielle's spot in the Fruitvale till like 5 o'clock in the morning. Um, and we were all playing music. He had turntables, and then our friend Jacob also taught us. Jacob had been DJing for longer. He taught us like how to actually mix and key match and do all those things. Made us do it with 45s because he's like, you gotta learn it the old-fashioned way first. And then we started a party series. We also had a name for our group. It was called La Pelanga. And like back then, there weren't as many people playing music from like between the tropics and around the world and through the decades. So yeah, so we started a Bay Area party series. I think one of the first big ones was like a fundraiser for Haiti. At the time been hit. And then we did it for another 11 years.
Okay.
We wound up opening for a lot of like pretty incredible musicians. Like a lot of them weren't like huge, but then they became huge. Like,
Sure.
we had a whole bunch of friends like in East LA that would like come up, and then we would like spin, and we would host them, and we would promote, and then like next thing you know, they're like blowing up. Um, so yeah. I mean, we played before Celso Pina, which is just like other Latin Grammy award winning like anyway. So like I could name a bunch of bands, but it was fun. And it's also
Yeah.
like a job.
Yeah.
Especially if you work New Year's Eve, then it's just a job.
Uh-huh.
Um but it's also it was also a blast. So from the creative writing side, I wrote a lot when I was tiny, like especially in elementary school, and all my teachers were like, "You need to write more stories." And then like over time, people are like, "Wow, you're good at math. Go into STEM. There aren't enough women in STEM. Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Okay, cool. I'll be an engineer because it's fun." It was fun. Like I like building robots and like making games and whatever. So I was like, "Cool, I'll do that." And I always thought that I would come back to writing somehow was when I was like, when I'm old and I got nothing else to do, I'm gonna be a writer. But then my godmother, 65 years of life, and this is a longer story, but she managed to reunite with the person she had wanted to marry 65 years earlier. And sparks flew, and I was like, I have to write about this. And then I lost her during the pandemic. And so then I was like, like I really gotta write. I mean, the intention had been to go and stay with her and collect stories. You get to a certain age, you start losing your elders. My elders are from Indonesia. And there's all these stories of what the world was like back then. And so I had started to try and dedicate more time to collecting their stories, and writing them up. But then, yeah, I lost my godmother, who's kind of like the closest thing I had to a mother for most of my life. So then I was like, well, I'm going to apply for an MFA program in creative writing. And I got in. And then I started studying writing. I was like, well, may as well get good now. If I'm going to be doing it if I'm lucky, I'll do it another couple decades, and then I'll be able to be good at some point, hopefully. Writing takes a while, It's not a
Yeah.
fast process, not an instant gratification process. And in order to like really treat it, creative writing as the art form that it is, you can't just be like, okay, cool, LLM, spit out a thing. Because you're an artist, and that's different from output.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a hard thing to explain to people sometimes. Yeah. So I went into this MFA program, and then that's when I got scouted by Handshake, which I think you were going to ask me about. But
Yeah. Well, we'll get there. I do have a question that just arose. Were those skills you were talking about earlier about incorporating design into every aspect of your life, recognizing where there's good design, where there's bad design, or was that built up ability that you had? Did that really help you as you're trying to dive into creative writing?
that's a great question. Nick, that's such a good question. It turns out that when you work in multiple creative fields, you start to see patterns across them.
Okay.
And I think that's where the like quote unquote interdisciplinary artist like term comes from. But like, okay, so my first semester, this creative writing program, I was so like, it's so humbling when you're in a field and you're like, make some headway in that field, and then you move to another field and you're like, I'm nobody. And like, I've done nothing, because it's a new field and I have
Yeah.
multiple friends. And like, even just watching, like, I don't know, Andre 3000, like, switch up what he does. I have other friends who are like super accomplished in one field and they switch fields, and we all go through this thing of just like, oh my God, like I've done nothing. I have no way. And then you get into this workshop and there's these, there's people who had like just come out of undergrad, but they studied writing in undergrad, and I didn't study writing in undergrad. So I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. And so they have this thing called the workshop, right? It's like people read each other's work and they give each other feedback. And so I'm like, oh no, everybody's going to be able to tell that like, I don't know anything. But I was talking to a friend later and they're like, no, I had no idea that that was your first writing workshop. Turns out design crits and writing workshops are very similar. So when you are designing something, you can say like, okay, like what was the goal of this design? Like, what were you trying to accomplish here? And then the same thing goes for writing. You're like, okay, what are you hoping to invoke emotionally in your reader? And then you could be like, oh, like, I have this one, I had this one or two classmates. Well, one of them specifically was really into body horror. And like, I am not into body horror. Okay. But like their writing was like deeply in body horror territory. So, if I was writing for me, I wouldn't have given him this advice about how to make it even more disturbing. But I know that like this, if he's submitting a piece and I'm like, what's your goal? And he's like, I want to really creep people out. I'm like, oh my God, what would make it even more creepy? Right? That's like, okay, I know what he's trying to do. Here's some ideas of how to play that up. As opposed to, I don't know, if you're not used to like giving creative feedback and being like, okay, it's this word that you used, or the ways that you paused here, or the way that you used white space on the page. What if you like broke up the rhythm of these sentences a little bit so that you kind of built up the moment a bit more? What if you like took this moment and you blew it out so that like people have to wait longer while that thing is dripping down the wall, like not knowing what it is, or, those are all creative choices, and the same thing happens in design. It's like, oh, okay, like how do you like hype someone up to get to that moment, like as they're going through this flow or whatever it is. So those are the ways those two things have helped each other.
Nice.
Did I answer your question?
You did. You did.
Okay.
You did. I'm very much wondering, have DJing and creative writing, have they impacted your professional career in any sort of way? But I mean like your design as somebody who's like a design professional, and whatever ways you see yourself in the on the LinkedIn lens, I'll say.
The LinkedIn lens?
Yeah, I've just coined this new term. That's what we're going to say. In the LinkedIn lens, how has it affected you, if at all?
Oh my God. That is an amazing question. I have no idea. All right, well, here's an attempt at an answer. I think that like having a life that you care about deeply outside of your quote unquote LinkedIn life slash LinkedIn lens, it can serve a number of different things. Okay. So one of them is it changes your network a little bit. And you sometimes wind up with strange overlaps so that when you need to get something done in an unexpected way, you have a bunch of contacts. So here's an example. When I am thinking about where to bring a team for food, I used to work with the DJing. We would oftentimes work pretty closely with a bunch of people who work in Bay Area food related stuff. And so now I'm like, okay, like here's the food spots. Like I know the places where I'm going to want to go get food. And then, you reach out and it's your contacts and it's your homies and you're like, hey, what's going on? And like, oh, look, I brought the team and whatever. Right. So that's like a different thing. It's a different way of being. The things do wind up kind of connecting in not obvious ways. Another thing is, it does make you, and actually this is like kind of advice to students, it does give you that little moment, especially, if you're a designer, I don't know for other fields, but in design, oftentimes you have to do a portfolio presentation at the beginning. You do say a little bit about who you are. It is like your little moment to stand out. And I think I do wind up like being memorable to people because they're like, oh, it's that person who does these other things. And so I think if you're like early in your career and you're like, I'm trying to figure out a way that I can like stand out a little bit, if there's other things that you're doing, oftentimes they wind up demonstrating something about you. And where I say like the event organizing or like that stuff, I'm not like I know how to put together an event. Like it also comes from working in entertainment, right?
Yeah.
Like yes, part of it's from management, but part of it is also the fact that like we were literally running events for like 11 years, right?
Yeah.
And doing the promotion and doing the all of the stuff, right? So yeah, those things affect each other. The creative writing, I mean, in design, it affects it very directly because I actually like have content strategists on my team who are writers, and I've hired writers before. And also like the way that words are on a page like make a big difference in interfaces. So it's like literally part of the field, but at the same time it's not because creative writing is pretty different from like writing for interfaces. But they're related. And then what else? I'm sure there's other ways that all those worlds will collide, but like, yeah, LinkedIn lens, I don't know.
Okay.
What
No,
do you think about LinkedIn? I want to know what you think of. What do you and like your friends think of LinkedIn, Nick? I want to know.
the answer that me and my friends would give are pretty different. I am
Oh,
chronically
okay.
online on LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn more than I use Instagram most days, which is pretty bad, I think, personally, for my it depends. It's tough. Being on Instagram all the time is tough for people in a different way than being on LinkedIn is tough for people. Neither of them are good. They're not great habits. You know, a lot of times, like especially, people go on Instagram and go, man, I'm fat. I'm not doing cool stuff. You go on LinkedIn, you're not doing cool stuff in a totally different way. So you're kind of getting smacked from both ways. You know what I mean? In terms of whether that be imposter syndrome, whether that be certain things that you're perceiving. You're seeing highlight reels on both things from other people that you know or you don't know or who look like you or who don't like you. But now you're seeing it in personal life and also professional life. So I would say that there's good and bad. Also, though, as well, LinkedIn is right now, I'm growing in Instagram, but right now it's my main form of promoting this podcast. LinkedIn algorithm
Oh,
gives you a lot of views to a lot of people, and that's kind of similar. I don't think it's as refined as like the TikTok or the Instagram algorithm, but in terms of being able to reach people for something that's like this, that's very hyper relevant to career stuff, it's very good. And I like games. I like the LinkedIn games. So, no, you can't stuff to beat that. They're like the New York Times games. So, I enjoy that as well as a small thing.
oh, they're games, like they're literal games. Got it. Have you tried Handshake?
I
Have you
have
been?
actually. I
You have.
recently.
Okay.
So one thing is I don't use LinkedIn for career search. Actually, I do a little bit. I do for a little bit of job search, but LinkedIn, It's not great. So actually, the other day, because internship season, it's on us. So I'm going through my recruitment, and I was like, you know what? I don't like using LinkedIn anymore. I'm seeing the same sponsored job posts every day. I go into Handshake. I'm like, oh, here are 3 jobs I'd actually be interested in. So yes, I do use Handshake.
Oh, wow. We should get you posting on the feed.
I did post. I promoted the podcast because I got a message. There was a promotion for like you post, and they were giving like $250 for person with like the most comments or the most likes on their post. It was
Oh
pretty.
my God.
Yeah.
Send it
So
to me. Is the promo already done? I was like, I can comment on your thing.
I don't. I just posted, to be honest, because there was a prompt that was, what's something that you've really been enjoying doing recently. So I was like, hey, I'll post about this, and then I did, and I got some likes from some University of Illinois peers. I got some random people following me now, which is strange to have. My Handshake profile is not very fleshed out. I have one piece of content. It's strange to have people following me on it, I think personally. But I have a couple followers now, so maybe my Handshake content creation era is just beginning. I don't know.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, they're working really hard on making it great for you, so.
Yeah, I it's actually I do quite like Handshake. It's good as well for career fairs. Everything's through Handshake for us actually, even on the school level. It's interesting.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
And
Cool.
I go to University of Illinois. It's a huge school, especially for computer science and tech. So it's cool to see that it's actually pretty widely adopted, I would say, on our campus. We're all forced to
Okay,
make
cool.
Handshake accounts at some point. So,
Yeah. Wow.
all right. I want to ask, we got about 5 minutes left. Going to do a quick thing. Can you, in 20 seconds, tell me about Handshake
Oh God. Yeah. Actually,
and what you do there, not just the company as a whole? Sorry.
in 20 seconds.
You're halfway through. I'm joking.
Nick. Handshake, I think, until this point, has been the career network for Gen Z that's been helping democratize opportunities for people, regardless of what they have access to coming into the game. So that is my 20-second spiel for like what it's been. However, Handshake, like many places, is evolving into the network for the AI economy and figuring out what we're doing with the changing nature of the labor market and how we can help people navigate that. As if everything changes. So what that means is that we're also helping and at the center of some of the forefront of AI model creation. So that's it.
Okay.
Oh,
right.
And I'm the VP of design there.
Small aspect.
So I take care of designing the design team. Yeah.
Very nice.
That's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
All right. And then, so my final question for you to wrap things up is, I'm very curious, how has your view of yourself changed as you've gone through your career?
Oh my God, Nick, what a question to end on.
I lined it up perfectly.
I know. Amazing. How has my view of myself changed over the course of my career? So when you know how you work out and you're like, okay, I'm going to do push up and then, or I'm going to hold a plank, and then like you do it and it's like terrible, or you do burpees and they're terrible. And then like you do more of them. And then, I don't know, say you do Bulgarian split squats or whatever. And then all of a sudden these things that were like really freaking hard become a little less hard over time. So I think that there are, over the course of my career, I don't necessarily think that I know everything. Like, part of the problem of like knowing more is that you learn always that there's more for you to do. And part of the problem of getting better at anything is that you realize that there's so much better that you could be. If you have that kind of personality, which I do. Some people aren't. Some people are like, I'm the shit, let's go. And like, if you're that person, like, that's amazing. That's great. I'm so happy for you. And I wonder what that's like all the time, but that's not who I am. I'm the kind of person that always sees like what I could be doing better. But what I do know is that I now have a track record of all the times that I went into something and I was terrible at it, and then I learned and I got better. So I know, I have learned that I know how to learn, and I have learned how to learn. I've learned how to collect feedback on what I'm doing, to look at it with a critical eye, to like not despair for too long if I'm not hitting my own standards yet, because I know that I've already been through the journey of like not hitting my own standards yet, and then eventually like getting better at the thing and being able to look back and be like, oh, I did get better at that. And that's growth. So that's cool. I have never, and this is my fun, spicy take to end on, I have never had confidence or attained confidence as a prerequisite for doing anything. That is a hill I will die on. I don't think having the confidence to do something is a prerequisite. I think if you're fascinated by something and you really go for it and you get into it and you get out of your own way, it doesn't matter whether or not you're confident or not. Just like let yourself be a nerd about it, and forget about yourself. Like this whole idea that you have to have confidence in order to do a thing, like it centers you in a way that I'm like, you know what? No, it's not about you. It's about the thing. Just like get the thing done and then do it and over again, and then look at what you could be doing better and then do it again and then keep getting better, and like don't just get yourself out of the way, because like we just get in our own way a lot. And I certainly have the kind of brain that gets in its own way a lot. So like advise against, if you have a sort of self-esteem that works similarly to mine, which is like a little bit brutal, or like very brutal, then like you need to learn how to just get it to, it doesn't mean that it's like fixed itself. You just need to be like, hey, I'm not gonna like take a blankie and some hot chocolate and I'm gonna go focus on the thing I'm trying to do right now. And then you come back and you might still have low self-esteem, but like she's sitting in the corner and she's busy right now. So you can like focus on your thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. I don't know how are you like, how are you? How would you categorize yourself with that?
Whether or not I have the confidence of a mediocre white man. So I'm pretty blessed in that sense. I try not to be mediocre. I try to be excellent, but I do feel pretty good about myself in my pursuit. So that's
amazing. I love that for you.
I heard that term the other day. Somebody was like, but anyways, yeah. Yes, but I appreciate you sharing, because it's very difficult for me to communicate those ideas because that's not my experience. So thank you for that.
Well, so shout out to those of you who feel similarly to me. Hi, we're out here. You might wind up doing like a whole bunch of great things in your life, and not really realizing it.
Is there something missing with that? Well, all right. I know you have to run. Thank you so much. This has been a really enjoyable conversation. Thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time. Really
Thank you
nice.
so much for having me, Nick.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have any thoughts, feedback, or just want to say hi, shoot me an email at nick@reroutedpod.com. If you like the show, leave a review, give us a follow, and subscribe. You can find links to our website and socials in the description below. I'm looking forward to seeing you next week.